Welcome back to the Pool Pro Podcast. On today's episode, Hasa CEO Chris Brink discusses the recent shortages of liquid, chlorine, and acid. You're not going to want to miss this episode. Welcome back to the Pool Pro Podcast. This is Michelle Cavanaugh with co-host
Dave Rockwell here.
Hey, Dave, how are you? Nice to see your face. I don't get to see you as often as I'd like
to.
to.
It's been a while.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. How's things in North Dakota?
Oh, go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
How's North Dakota treating you?
I'm in South Dakota, actually.
South Dakota. Sorry about that.
Yes, it's just as hot as North Dakota, I'm sure. So we're good. But yeah, it's fine here. And I just wanted to thank you, Dave, for bringing forth this topic that we're going to talk about today, because it's so important. And you see it everywhere you look, on social media, everywhere you look. This is a topic that's being brought up and discussed. And I think it's really important that you brought this to the table for us today. So thank you for doing that. Can you explain, Dave, a little bit about
we're living
in
unprecedented times. We're seeing things we've never seen before all over the map. But one of the things that really struck me, first time in 33 years, and it actually happened 3 times in the last 2 weeks. I went to the supply house and they had no chlorine on the shelves, not just no liquid, but any compound that releases free chlorine in the water, gone.
Nothing.
And so Terry Arco from Hasa has been a great friend of the program, and I called him up and asked him for a little insight on what was going on, and one thing led to another, and he took us right to the top. So we're really pleased today to have Chris Brink, the CEO of Hasa, and he's going to help us kind of get to the bottom of what's going on and help us see a little bit into the future, if there's a ray of hope ahead. So yes. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Chris.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Michelle. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak directly to the pro community today. It's all-time high demand is creating a lot of concern all the way through the industry. And I think no better time than now for us to maybe explain a little bit about what's going on, because lack of information creates fear and doubt. Fear and doubt creates behaviors that are not positive for the overall industry. And there are some things, if we all quiet ourselves a little bit and think through how to get through this situation, are going to allow us to get through it together as an industry. So thank you.
So we had talked to Terry maybe just a matter of a few weeks or months ago, and he was very positive about Hasa's ability to ramp up production and supply the industry. He was very, very helpful, but also very positive in his outlook.
Yeah.
So we're interested in what has changed now. Pool people in general are not really necessarily always good at seeing nuances in things. The tablet shortage is a direct linear. There was a fire at a plant, the plant shut down, equals supply crisis with tabs. Right. This situation, as I am only beginning to understand it, seems to be a little more complex than that. Can you maybe give us an idea of what's going on here?
Yeah, well, so there's a short-term and a long-term explanation of the things that are going on. So I'm going to start a little bit, if you don't mind, kind of at the 100,000-foot level, the way somebody in a job like mine has to really think about the industry and think about what we need to do. And you're absolutely right. I mean, back in September, that terrible fire that one of the suppliers in the industry suffered through created the beginning of a ripple, which is continuing to be felt even to today, and probably is going to continue to be felt well into next year. And that was the shortage of tricore tabs, right? And that industry participant was probably supplying anywhere from 20% to as much as half of the industry on tricore tabs used for swimming applications. And we were very attentive to that even back in September and October, and thinking about what are we going to do in order to help out the industry in what we knew was going to be a strident swimming year. I mean, we all enjoyed, as rough as COVID was, we in the industry enjoyed probably a record year. Right. Most pool pros saw backyard participation, the use of home swimming pools, and so forth,
People that hadn't
it was
swam in their
around here.
backyard pool for years started using them all of a sudden. So it was a boom.
Absolutely. And we anticipated, and what we're seeing right now is that that trend has continued. People have rediscovered the pool, and simultaneously more pools have been and are being built and have been built in probably the 20-year past history of the country. So there are more pools out in there in the market than there ever have been in the history of the country, and typically bigger pools too.
Yep.
So the combination of these factors we knew was going to culminate in an increased demand for liquid products, not only as shock, where it's primarily been used, but now more and more as a daily sanitizer. And even back then, we were putting pretty significant investment. I mean, Hasa has probably put, over the last 3 years that I've been with the company, and either COO or CEO, probably an aggregate over $20 million of investment into the company in order to improve capacity, improve our footprint, improve the ability to get more liquid chlorine to the pool pro market. And that has paid back in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, while we have made more chlorine, liquid chlorine, than we ever have in the history of the company, it's not been enough to meet demand. And, by the way, this is in conversations with all of the major supply houses, all the major distributors, all the major retailers. We're having discussions with all of these folks, very smart folks who understand the industry to its bones. But we've, as much as we thought was going to be required, it's been maybe as much as twice as much more as anybody had anticipated.
Crazy.
So we're facing that as we speak, and as we head into the season. And everybody knows seasons are always tricky. Nobody ever has enough of whatever.
Right.
And we're getting, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and we've been punched in the face pretty hard collectively this season. But short of those long-term or high-level industry demand dynamics, there was a short-term kind of hand grenade that hit the chlorine supply chain. If I'm boring you with some of this talk,
No, we like this.
No, here you're talking the liquid chlorine supply chain.
Yeah, I'll explain in a minute. Sodium hypochlorite, bleach, pool chlorine, which we all know and love, is actually made of two commodity chemicals. One is called caustic, or sodium hydroxide, and the other is called elemental chlorine. And those products come from what's called the chlor-alkali supply chain. And there are probably 6 to 8 manufacturers nationally of these fundamental elemental chemicals. Hasa is a buyer of those products. We source them from all over the country and even overseas in many cases. We then combine those to make sodium hypochlorite fresh at all of the facilities, and then put them into the appropriate packaging. Well, in June, one of the major manufacturers of elemental chlorine, which we then use to make bleach, sodium hypochlorite, had a force majeure event. So they had a transformer failure that then resulted in about 30%, as we estimated, of all the West Coast capacity for all chlorine on the West Coast to be shut down. And at that time was for an unforeseen amount of time. And so that forced us actually in Washington State, where we supply much more than just swimming pool chlorine. We supplied everything from industrial applications, drinking water, municipal applications. That forced us also to declare a force majeure only in Washington State out of that facility. But more importantly, what occurred as a result of that is the entire industry tightened up on their ability to make bleach. Whoever was making bleach, whether it be some of the large multinationals that make bleach, or some of the small bleachers and small mom and pop shops that make bleach across the country, availability of the fundamental molecule required tightened up significantly, and for an unknown amount of time. Hasa did a lot of things. We usually have a pretty stretched out supply chain. We usually have product ordered out 2 to 3 months in advance in order to make enough bleach for the industry. At the time, Terry was out there with a message I told him to give. So it's my fault. If anyone wants to blame Hasa for that message, it was my fault, because at the time it looked like we were going to have plenty of capacity to serve the industry. That was before this force majeure event occurred and caused us to stub our toe. The other thing that has been more difficult for us than we anticipated going into the season is the availability of labor. I was happy to see the jobs report today, and it's being reflected in our own hiring. But, honestly, we did not anticipate, even though we've done some pretty over and above things to take care of our employees, our people, who wake up every day and work hard to get plenty of bleach out the door. We have not been able to hire at the pace that we anticipated or would like to have hired. And getting that bleach into a bottle is a very labor intensive process, especially in the returnable format. And so that has slowed down our ability to, I would say, exceed our plans for the year in our ability to manufacture enough sodium hypochlorite for this really unprecedented industry demand. So it was a lot. I'll take a breather. Were there any questions from what I just explained?
Oh, I mean, I really appreciate knowing that. This happens to us in Southern California on all kinds of different levels. One of the biggest things I think of is gasoline. It's like they always seem to shut down a refinery for maintenance just before a holiday weekend, and the prices spike through the roof. And you sit there and go, is this manipulated or is this real? And so I really appreciate your explaining that. It helps us to really understand the kind of the things that have been going on in the background, things that none of us in the field ever really see or get to think about much.
But they can relate, Dave, to the fact that they can't find anybody to hire either. So they at least relate to that.
I mean, that's at every level, probably every industry. It's like, for a little while during COVID, it was actually people could make more money sitting at home collecting unemployment than they could working, and now that's a big ocean liner to turn around right now. But we got to get people back to work.
Yeah, and you have to get great people that are going to operate safely, because if you don't have safe operations, then nothing else matters.
Right. Absolutely.
So I'm assuming some of these factors are affecting what we see. We're not only seeing shortages, but we're also seeing price increases. I know acid is up $4 a gallon here now, and are these permanent price increases? Are they spikes? What can we anticipate in terms of what we pay for chlorine?
Well, I can't speak to the broader industry and what competitors are doing, but Hasa has not put an increase into the market during the summer. We did ask for some price relief earlier in the year because we anticipated that hiring was going to be harder. Even then, we were paying more for the elemental products. But I view our job as Hasa as to be the premier chemical partner of each and every pro out there in the industry. And so, to the point that you make about, the summer gas hike and all those things, those types of dynamics absolutely exist in the industry that I deal with, where I'm acting like a chemical company, but it's our job to be the big brother in the schoolyard to keep those guys from bullying the pro. So we do everything we can to invest smartly into the business, invest smartly into our people, take good care of our people in order to make sure we can make more bleach each and every day and make it safe and make it at a very high quality, because I'm sure we'll get to the idea, the concept of hoarding a little bit later today, but you want that bleach fresh. You don't want that bleach having sat on the shelf for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, because it's going to lose its efficacy very fast. So the best possible thing a pro can do is when they can get it, is use the bleach and use it as smartly as possible and take advantage of the high efficacy.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another thing that I ran into, a topic that came up at the supply houses and speaking with the branch managers and the counter personnel there. One of the reasons that they're getting limited shipments down here in Southern California is people are hoarding, and they're not putting the shells and bottles back into circulation. So even though the plants down here have chlorine, they don't have any vessels to put it in. And so, I mean, it's kind of like last year we all scratched our head. It's like people started hoarding toilet paper in the middle of a respiratory virus. And
wrong end.
But, there's a certain you kind of got to look yourself in the mirror at some point, and when there's a crisis, either in the industry or in any other aspect of life, what are your ethics? What are your, what kind of a person are you? Are you just totally survivalist, me first, everybody else can suffer and die? Or do you have other people in mind as well? And so I think that's something that I would make a plea to people to think about other people. It's obviously you got to take care of your pools, but so does everybody else. That said, there are very strict, starting to be down here, limits on the amount of chlorine that you can buy. And now with the issue of the shortage of shells and bottles, they're only selling on an even exchange basis. So the distributors are trying to take the matter in hand and help out too. But it's something we should all kind of be aware of and think about. It's we got to kind of get through this thing together.
Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on a couple really, really good points there. So first of all, we're proud to offer the returnable 4x1 container. And, something I would recommend, and something we're trying to emphasize in markets where we sell both one-time use containers and returnable containers. Using a returnable container is the best possible thing you can do, because every time you use a returnable container and you return the deposit, you're allowing us to buy a bottle once and use it as many as 30 times before we have to go buy another bottle and source another bottle and source another cap in many cases. So I would just ask all the pros out there to take good care of your cases. Not all, some pros like to practice their football goalpost kicking with our cases. Some take pristine care of them, just like they do their trucks. But the better shape you can return those cases and bottles in, the better you're helping us all. And you're helping us conserve, by the way. So, and that's a message we shouldn't lose through all of this. Is conservation is key. The second thing is, a lot of pros will pour a full gallon bottle to shock 10,000 gallons of chlorine. And if you read the instructions, you actually don't need the full bottle. So, just like, my grandmother used to conserve sugar during the war, I would encourage pros to really just pay careful attention to the technical use of the product. They may find, backing up, liquid chlorine is the most cost-effective way to sanitize a pool if used at the proper doses. That's why over the past decade, commercial pools where they really are counting their pennies and dollars and cents count have kind of en masse converted to liquid systems from other types of sanitization systems, because when you use it the right way and you carefully dose and monitor, you can really make that chlorine stretch a long distance. So I would just encourage pros where they can to really pay attention to the instructions, go through a couple extra test kits, make sure that you're actually titrating to the right levels of chlorine in the swimming pool, and really stretch it out. I'm sure they're already doing it. A lot of smart guys out there, but I would just remind them again to do it. And to the extent that they want help from our folks, Ask Terry is broadly available. We've got 14 sales reps on the West Coast through to Texas, all CPO certified, ready to help those pros kind of remember how to get the most mileage out of their chlorine. And I will tell you, we put the chlorine out, we make it at 13.2%. It's probably getting to the pro at 12.5. It's as fresh as it can be, because we're getting a bottle and then we're filling that bottle within 2 hours and getting it back out the door. So it's as fresh as can be, which means they're going to get a little more mileage out of the chlorine we're putting out today. It's a game, like I like football analogies. It's a game of inches right now, and they should just try to get everything they can out of every gallon of chlorine that they're getting. So that being said, we're doing everything we can to put more out in July than we put out in June and so forth. And we're going to continue to do that.
I'm going to recommend our listeners today go back and find the last discussion we had with Terry Arco, because we touched on exactly those points. Because chlorine is in short supply, the best thing to do to stretch it out is exactly what you just said: dose it properly. The first calculation
we'll put the link in the description. So look at the description of this video on YouTube, guys. The link to that particular podcast episode's right there. Just click on it and watch that, because absolutely that was a great podcast.
We came up with some. Terry had some great ideas, We kind of brainstormed a little bit, but the very first calculation that you learn in your CPO training is length times width times average depth times 7.5. If you don't know the gallonage in each one of your pools, you're flying blind. You are, it's like trying to run your business without a budget. You're wasting, I guarantee you're wasting chlorine if you're just flying by the seat of your pants. It's time for that to stop. It's time to start dosing it properly. Use cyanuric acid correctly. One of the best things that happened to the industry is the shortage of tabs, I think, because people were just addicted to adding cyanuric acid to their pool, and that's not the best thing for the water quality in your pool. So this is a chance to kind of reboot and rethink, and if we need to learn a little bit more. Everybody thinks CPO is just for commercial pool people. It's a tremendous course that gives you a really solid basis for how to properly take care of a pool from all different angles.
And we just recently partnered with Bob Lowry's PCTI. We just essentially had an acquisition of all the assets there. So to the extent that pros want access to that training, that content, we're going to make that broadly available. So whatever we can do to help pros just remember how to be a little bit smarter about how they're taking care of their pools, we'll do whatever we can in that regard. And by the way, it's the best thing for the industry. I'm not about selling one drop of bleach that doesn't need to be used. I'd rather it all be used smartly and everybody get the best value for the dollar. That's how the industry works. And by the way, it's the right thing for the environment.
Yes.
And that Bob Lowry course is another excellent course, and
it is
for just a good primer in how to handle the chemistry in a pool. I took his course, not in its current iteration, but back in the very early 2000s, and it was an eye opener. We all walked out of there going, man, there's things that we didn't think about, that we didn't know. Back then, testing was very sloppy compared to the way we do it today. Guys were taking drops of OTO and dropping it in the pool. Oh yeah, there's chlorine. They do the same thing with the pH, just drop it right into the pool. Well, yeah, there's pH there. We don't know what it is, but it turned the thing into color. Nobody measured alkalinity every week. Nobody ran their pool according to the full Langmuir saturation index. And that was probably a seminal moment for me in my career. I walked out of there going, man, the response, it impressed upon me the responsibility you take on when you take on a customer's service account. They put an enormous amount of trust in you. Their family's health is in your hands. They're a huge investment that they made in that pool. Chances are they really stretched and financed and did everything they could to get that pool. All that investment is in your hands. If you're not competent, if you're not professional, and you're not, doing your job to the best of your ability, then they may not realize it. They may not even know what they're supposed to be asking for, but you're not doing your job.
Absolutely. So there's a light. I think you touched on it briefly, Chris, but is there a light at the end of this tunnel?
Yeah. So, I mentioned that there was the force majeure event upstream in the availability of elemental chlorine that occurred in June. That seems to be clearing up. Simultaneous to that, we also started grabbing chlorine from, just like pros are trying to do with our bleach, we started grabbing elemental chlorine from all points, northeast and south in the continent. So we have now what are coming to be sufficient, and then we think by the end of July, potentially abundant amounts of elemental chlorine available for us to make plenty of bleach for the pool community. Then the only question is going to be how quickly and how well can we hire people to get that stuff into bottles, and how many drivers can we get to get them out to wherever they're needed. So those are still some constraints, but the good news is We're going to be making more in July than we ever have in the history of the company. We'll make a lot more in July than we made in June, and August will be even better. I view the season as a 4-quarter game, June, July, August, September. And I would say the market beat us in June, but I think we're going to pull up to even in July. And I think we'll be winning by August, and hopefully we'll win the Super Bowl in September.
Nice.
That's fantastic. Great thing to say. I love that you say that if you beat us, beat you in June, but you're going to pull forward and like you said, beat the game here as it's coming forward. And that's all anybody wants to hear. For those people out there that are, again, I see it all over social media, the tremendous amount of struggle that people are having in the pool service industry and builders too, and it's like, just get up and just keep going on every day. And that's what people are saying on social media, is just to get up and keep going and doing what you can do. You can't do everything. So all you can do is what you can do. And then hopefully, in a few months or, end of the year, we'll get through this together as a team in the industry. And hopefully we won't have to deal with this, anytime soon.
Yeah. And pool service is an American dream kind of business. I mean, you can start with an idea and the willingness to learn and be in business for yourself. And really, I've met amazing people in the industry that have been happy with their 100 pools to serve and just have a lifestyle business they love. And I've seen folks that now have 20 and 30 truck concerns because they had an entrepreneurial mindset and wanted to build a business like that. And we take our obligation to that community very seriously. And I would not just say that the market beat Hasa. I would say the market beat us all in July, because the demand was just off the chain. And our pros did not feel it, but we put out more bleach to the pool community in June this year than we ever have in the history of the company. It just was not enough to keep up with demand. That being said, we're going to do better in July than we did in June, and better in August than we did in July. And short of the slight uncertainty in the hiring market and the ability to get drivers, I think, I can tell you that the plants are ready to put out the product, because we've definitely been putting those investments in since last year. And I know that our distribution and retail partners are ready to provide it, because we've been having these conversations literally since October in order to try to take care of those pros.
Chris, this has been really enlightening.
Yes.
I know you've got to be a busy guy right now. I sure appreciate you taking this time. It's I feel a lot better just knowing, a little more about the situation, knowing some of the details, and I feel that you've given us some reassurance that things are going to get better, and we really appreciate that. Most of all, I just really appreciate you taking the time to talk to the full service community here.
Well, I know that the more than 10,000 pros out there that depend on Hasa, they know there's no such thing as a silver bullet. They know it's always ever a lot of sweat and hard work. So that's the way we work at Hasa too. And as soon as we're done here, I'm going to go back there and crack open a rail car of chlorine with the team and get back to making some bleach for you guys.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Chris. This has been great. We've truly appreciated your time.
Have a great day.
Thanks very much for letting us get the message out. And everybody keep your head down. We're gonna get through it.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
A new voice in the industry, a resource for all, education for you. This is Pool Pro Podcast. Build relationships and share important news as we get ready for our next backyard adventure. Pool Pro Podcast. Backyard adventures are better together. Please take a moment to share, like, and review our content with all of those that would be interested.